tell me about the data behind the team report cards here, because we saw the grades. A lot of people saw the grades, and that's a lot of grist for Mills for sure, which we'll dive into a little bit. But what is the data gathering,
Yeah,
JC?
so this is the third year that we've done this. This year we had 1,695 players respond with full report card or full surveys. That's 77% of our membership ended up responding, and it gives us a really good look into each player's team and how they interact with their facility on a day-to-day basis. And again, this isn't about wins and losses. As you can tell, there's nothing connecting teams that win versus teams that not. It's not like the teams that win are on the top, but that's somewhat the point, right? Like we want to know how the players feel or are treated on a day-to-day basis in their facilities. And we've broken it out into several categories, really basing it off how players interact with their building. You come in, you grab your breakfast, you go to the locker room, then you go get treatment in the training room, you work out in the weight room, all the different areas you interact with and the staffs that staff those areas. We want to know how they're doing. And the good news is after year three, we're seeing major improvements across the league. And I don't think we can claim that they're because of the report cards. I think it matches up timeline wise. But in the end, what our job is, or what our goal is as a union, is to see ever rising standards in the league, which what we are seeing. We're seeing teams make major improvements. You look at a team like the Washington Commanders, who had been 32nd overall the first 2 years, now jump up to 11th. And all that was done wasn't knocking down the facility and putting $50 million in. They reinvested in the food program. They added some things for the families. They changed how they travel. They brought in a new head coach. Like all of these things made giant changes, which shot them up the overall rankings, which again is great for our guys that we can see such improvements in just a single year.
Yeah, there was also another change there you didn't mention, JC, that might have meant something or two or a million different ways. You didn't mention
Yeah,
the ownership changing,
I think
JC.
Josh Harris said one of my favorite quotes. "I'm not an F minus guy," he said after year two, and he lived up to that. He is definitely not an F minus guy. I think his players felt that, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and he responded and made so many things better around that building. And just going there for our team visits, you could feel the energy just different from previous years. A lot of credit goes to Josh. A lot of credit goes to Dan Quinn and his staff, and the players there too for having such an amazing year. But again, that's the goal of these report cards, is to make sure players have a look into what's going on at other buildings and make sure they understand what their standards are, how their team's treating them versus other teams. So it's been a really valuable tool for us for 3 years now.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of correlating grades to winning on the field, you said that those are not really correlated. The Super Bowl champs got an F in team travel, and I guess I know Josh, Harris said he's not an F minus guy. He got an F for the locker room. Patriots getting an F for team travel. I mean, part of that is, from what we heard, no Wi-Fi and ashtrays on an antiquated aircraft. JC, is your intention to, for lack of a better phrase, embarrass the franchise into fixing that sort of stuff, or what, or do you actually talk to the Patriots about this sort of thing in advance of the cards coming out?
Yeah, it's not a public shaming. I think what we'd like to see is what Josh took it as, is shining a light on the issues that the players are experiencing, and then the ownership group or the coaches or the staffs then can figure out ways to improve those areas. And that's what we saw with the Commanders. We saw that for a team like the Falcons too, who made large jumps. In the end, it is a very hard thing when you're a player and you have an issue going on at the facility or something doesn't feel right. It is a big ask to say, walk up to ownership and tell them what they're doing is not good enough. And if that's the expectation, I think you probably don't get a lot of feedback from ownership or for ownership. If that's the expectation, is that you're going to have a player who goes up to their head boss and says, "Hey, you're not living up to your end of the bargain." So I think what this is really giving candid feedback, and pointing out to areas where they can make huge differences. And again, we're not talking about to Josh Harris's. Josh didn't have to knock down that facility to make giant improvements. Instead, Josh picked a lot of you would say the softer skills, the softer issues around the staffing, around the food, around the travel, and it made a giant difference for his team and how they interacted with the facility or how they felt taken care of. And that two's the goal.
Do you hear from Woody Johnson after the Jets give him an F, the only ownership grade with that letter?
I've not heard from Woody. These are things too that we would love to have that type of dialogue with teams, both from a high level head coach ownership side, but also from the individual staff levels too, where what this has proven over 3 years is the staffs at these teams want to do good work. They want to help out the guys. They want to give a good work environment for the players. And sometimes they have questions on how we can do that better. What are guys looking for? How can I do my job better? They want to ask those questions. There are some things we're not allowed to talk to individual teams about without the league being involved, and that causes some issues. But that's something we would love to be a resource in those discussions to these teams, because in the end, we all should be wanting the same thing, right? Like we want the players to be taken care of, because healthier, more taken care of players will then perform better on the field, which is better for all of us when the product's better, because that means everybody's bringing in more money. Like there's all things that we should be working together on to make these improvements. But that's a struggle now, is how we can do that and how we can have those conversations with the teams.
Yeah, locker room, training staff, weight room, strength coaches, team travel, head coach, ownership. Those are the 8 categories in which you asked your membership to vote on. Based, I can tell, only 3 teams had an A in every single category, whether it's the actual letter minus or plus. Vikings, Dolphins, and Raiders. Does this affect free agency destinations, do you think? Do players use this as a resource when they're going about their business about where to go? JC?
I think it's probably, there's a lot of factors in free agency, right? Like it's not like you have depending on who you were. For myself, it's not like I had 32 teams asking me to come play for them when I was playing. So you already have a limitation. And then it comes down to what your offer is, what you're looking for, there's a ton of variables. I think the most valuable part of these has been peeling back the curtain on the player experience. So I remember my first year, I was talking to a player and I was like, "Hey, it doesn't look like your team travel is really up to standard across the league." And they're like, "What do you mean by that?" And I was like, "You guys have roommates on the road." And he was like, "Other players get to have their own room?" And I was like, "Yeah, most other teams give you your own room." And I was like, "Also, you guys don't get to sit first class. The coaches sit first class." And he was like, "Wait, other teams let their players sit first class?" And you never really got that information before these scorecards went out. The only way you would learn that was if you signed a free agent or you traded for somebody who came from a team that was doing things differently. Would that word start to spread? So I think the really valuable part of this is allowing everybody at their teams to see at what standard they're being treated or where they fall. Hey, if we're one of 3 teams that aren't offering this, that kind of says something about your team, that most of the other teams are willing to offer that to its players other than them. So I think really peeling back the curtain and giving them access to the information is the valuable part.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show live weekdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on Roku Sports Channel in the U.S.